Hey, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Studio 118, brought to you by Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18. Come, let us reason, says the Lord. I'm Reuben, and this is Bunjee.
Howdy.
Welcome. We're here streaming live from Calvary South Austin in Austin, Texas. We invite you to get to know us a little bit more. If you'd like to, we meet here in person at Calvary South Austin on Sunday mornings at 9:15 a.m. and 11:15 a.m., as well as on Wednesday evenings at 7 o'clock p.m. So we'd love to see you. If you have any questions about who we are, what we're about, what we teach, feel free to go ahead and call our church at 512-576-5433. Or shoot us an email if you'd like. You can email info@calvarysouthAustin.com. We'd love to hear from you. Talking about getting in touch with us, we are streaming live on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to jump on that live chat, say hi. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our Studio 118 channel. But drop a line there on the live chat, and you can leave your questions for our Q&A session, as we always do after our discussion. Tonight's going to be a good one, as usual. But yeah, don't forget to share the stream links with all your social media platforms. We'd love to get other people involved in the conversation. Our aim here with Studio 118 is to tackle tough theological and just current cultural issues as well, to have good conversations and raise important questions and see how Christians should respond, and today is no exception. So why don't we jump right into it? Let's see, Bunjee. Last month we tackled Catholicism, but I think before that we actually tackled the topic of abortion, and I bring that up because recently we saw that the Roe v. Wade decision came through, and that came down with a big splash.
Yes.
And praise the Lord that now we have. It basically shoots back to the states, but I truly believe that many unborn lives will be saved as a result. So
It's good news, and it set off several trigger laws in several states, including Texas, and immediately, Ken Paxton informed us that abortion was immediately banned here in Texas, and then there was a lower court that then tried to put a ban on the ban. And then the Texas Supreme Court came back and just said nope. And
yes.
And so at this point, abortions are effectively banned here in the state of Texas.
Right. So, and for the audience, we've tackled the topic of abortion already previously. We have 2 episodes on this. So again, jump on our Studio 118 YouTube channel, and you can check out those past episodes. But we go in depth into all the arguments for and against the pro-life and pro-choice position, and we also consider the theological thinking behind what is life and whatnot, what are the implications. So those were all great things. So when we heard that Roe v. Wade was now overturned, it was a great moment. But hopefully, something we aim to do with this channel and these episodes is to again provide those the thinking behind the rationale and the justification, biblically speaking, so that people can go and have those conversations with the people from the other side, right?
Right. I mean, this is really just a milestone.
Yeah.
Because as you pointed out, what this means is that the decisions go back to the states, where it should have been in the first place.
Right.
Effectively, the Supreme Court just basically handed the power back to the states. Those who are saying, "Oh, this is overreach. This is what is it? Judicial supremacy and these sorts of they're destroying democracy and these sorts of things." It's like these people really haven't thought through what actually happened, and it's really unheard of to see people in power handing that power back.
Right.
So the federal government, effectively through the Supreme Court, has handed the power back to each state, and is just allowing every state to now decide for themselves how they want to either provide or not provide abortion, as a service.
Yeah, so you'll have states, just like New York, right? That's the one that comes to mind when I always think about this, where they permit abortion all the way up to 9 months.
They will continue terminating the lives of little babies just because of their proximity.
Yeah, and definitely several other states that have more restrictions going farther and farther back as we can to protect life. But yeah, so you're going to have a mishmash of states now that implement different kinds of policies, different kinds of restrictions, if any at all. But like I thought about it from the outset, it's now the hard work begins.
Right.
Now it's up to each individual, each body politic now to go and now try to lobby your leaders to try to think rationally and biblically about these positions.
Yes.
But yes, we were ultimately glad to hear that, yes, power was handed back to the states, back to the individuals. But now let's see where we go from here.
Exciting times. And, the Supreme Court just came down with a decision on the coach who prayed on the football field and got fired.
Yes.
They found in his favor the EPA situation, where the Supreme Court is basically telling, the federal government that they don't have the right to, control emissions and these sorts of things at a certain level. It's just like, I don't know exactly.
Who is the Supreme Court?
Where were you guys back in 2020? But and then today, we're considering the decision that the Supreme Court recently made regarding the Second Amendment and a statute in New York City or New York State.
Yes, but first we do have to acknowledge the title of tonight's episode, which is top notch, if I may say. We're considering the question: should the church have pew pew pews? Right? I think that's the way you say it. This has been a long-standing debate within Christendom of whether we should have pews in the church or we should have just regular folding chairs. Is that the way it goes?
I don't think that's what we mean.
No, my bad. I prepared for the wrong.
Yeah, but you have a whole argument about seating.
Yes. I'm on ashleyfurniture.com right now, and I shouldn't be there now. Okay.
Yeah.
No, we're considering the topic of guns and weapons in general, and that's going to dovetail into a bunch of other topics related. But yes, in light of recent events, now on a serious note, right? Currently, within the year to date, rather, we've had some really tragic shootings.
Yes.
That happened. One that was close to our home here. On May 24th, the Uvalde, Texas shooting in Robb Elementary, where an 18-year-old gunman opened fire and killed 19 children and 2 teachers and wounded others. But this was definitely tragic. This is very close to home. And then July 4th, not too far removed from May 24th, that was just 3 days ago, where a gunman opened fire on a July 4th parade there in Highland Park in Illinois, killed 6 people and wounded dozens more by firing from a rooftop. Thankfully, they captured that person, and hopefully will be brought to swift justice there.
Right.
But, these occurrences, these stories that we're hearing in the news about mass shootings, as they call them, right? They're happening. They seem to be happening much more too often, and we just definitely hear about them, and they can definitely cause just a stirring in the soul, culturally speaking, right? Everybody really stops to consider, what are we doing here? What is the answer? How do we survive this? How do we properly mourn, and how do we actually prevent further mass shootings from occurring, right?
Yeah, I think regardless of what side of the argument you fall on, even going back to, like Sandy Hook in 2012, it's heartbreaking to consider, how these families have been affected by these shootings. And, it's real emotional to react to this in such a way of saying, we got to do something. We've got to fix this problem. We've got to figure this out. And in the midst of trying to figure this out, it's real easy for people on both sides of the debate, the pro-gun people and the anti-gun people, wherever you fall on that spectrum, it's real easy for us to assume the worst about the other side. And failing to realize, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. We can fail to realize that, we all want to solve this problem. Like, I think that the average American wants to see an end to school shootings and mass shootings and these sorts of things. But it's just that there's different ideas about what is the correct route to solving this issue. What is the problem, as a matter of fact? Of course, we recognize that bad people with guns are doing bad things. Even looking at, the 2022 stats alone, as of the shooting there on July 4th, that was the 309th mass shooting in the United States for this year. That's incredible. The Highland Park shooting is the 15th mass killing of 2022. And then it was the 11th mass shooting of that holiday weekend alone. So there were 11 mass shootings just on July 4th weekend.
And I believe that's where 3 or 4 people or more are killed.
I believe
in that one incident.
If I remember correctly, it's 4.
4 at least. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a lot of bloodshed. That's a lot of lives. I always consider, especially with the Robb Elementary little ones. I have little ones of my own, and can't imagine spending 8 years with your kid and then no longer. So this definitely raises the emotional anguish, the emotional toll. But you're right, where we tend to assume the worst of each other, but still these conversations need to be had, especially from now with Studio 118. What we try to do is also come at it from a Christian perspective, from a biblical perspective. How should Christians view these topics? The topics of can we have weapons? How should we view gun control laws? Should there be restrictions? Is the Second Amendment an actual God-given right? All these kinds of questions should be bubbling up, and we should learn as Christians, I believe, to start thinking more biblically about these types of questions and not taking them for granted.
Which then also brings more of a difficulty, because now not only is there just the secular aspect of this argument, but now you have to factor in different interpretations of the Bible, different ideas about what does the Bible actually say about self-defense, what does the Bible actually say about weapons, and then even considering the dispensation in which we live, the church age, is there something more to this argument or this discussion that would drive us in one direction or the other? And that's really what we have to consider today. And hopefully, as the audience, listens in and prepares questions for the Q&A time, that we would all have a real sense of God's grace for one another and make room for different ideas and different approaches to what we all want, which is the solution of saving our kids from mass shooters.
Yeah, so hopefully, audience member out there, if you're watching right now, please know that, as Bunjee just mentioned more than once, our aim is to approach this thinking through it with the serious respect that it deserves, taking into account that, yes, there may be people out there who know somebody who lost somebody, or maybe you've lost somebody to gun violence, and we're in no way trying to minimize any of that. But at the same time, we do believe that this is a conversation worth having, and hopefully it'll shed some light as to what certain assumptions might have been misapprehended, certain numbers, that we hear tossed out all the time. Are those actually the case? Do they match up with reality? And then, of course, how do we move on from here? What policies make sense? What policies are moral and immoral? And so let's go ahead and have that conversation. But we definitely want to approach it with the respect that it deserves. But I think, a good place to start really is, and this happened recently with those 2 recent examples that we brought up, the Robb Elementary and the Now, the Highland Park shooting, you immediately have people from both sides talking about, okay, these things need to be done or not done in order, because we see an increase in, gun violence. We see an increase in how many weapons are being purchased and whatnot. And this is just leading to a more violent culture, a more violent nation. Don't you know that America is probably the most violent nation in the world because of the number of guns? So you hear all these stats being thrown out, these facts getting fact-checked by fact-checkers, and so being shared on social medias. And how do we reconcile some of these things, and how do we think through these things? So maybe we can go through some of those, top reasons of why people want some certain gun control. Maybe we can walk through some of those.
Yeah, most certainly. There are some arguments that are commonly presented after most of the recent shootings. You'll have the talking heads jump on the mainstream media and start throwing these arguments around that I think most of the people in the audience are just nodding their head in agreement, I would assume. And then I hear some of these arguments, I'm just like, that doesn't make sense. That would not solve the problem. For example, one of the arguments that you'll commonly hear is, basically that gun violence in America is greater than any other country. Like the highest rate of gun-related homicides happen here in America. But really, this is only true if we inflate the numbers with those who use a gun to commit suicide. And that is what they do. They factor in those who use guns to kill themselves, right? So according to the Department of Justice, 60% of the adult firearm deaths in America stem from suicide. So 60% is huge. I mean, that's a large number within the 100% of what is considered gun violence. Yeah. So when they say gun violence is worse in America than anywhere else, here are the numbers, right? Well, you have to understand that 60% of that is somebody used a gun to kill themselves.
Right.
So in other words, 2 out of 3 incidents of gun violence here in America are actually just suicides. And still, that's tragic, but I personally wouldn't factor that in as gun violence in America. Because when I hear gun violence in America, what I imagine is one person with a gun doing something violent to another person, or 2 people with guns, or whatever the case, right? I don't imagine when I hear gun violence, suicide, right? So then if we remove the 60% of suicide-related deaths, well, then the gun violence ranking of the U.S., it drops us down from number 1, it drops us down to number 30.
Yeah.
There are 29 other countries with a greater level of gun violence than the U.S. And we're talking about countries like El Salvador, Venezuela, Guatemala, Colombia, even Mexico. Mexico has a higher rate of gun violence if America doesn't factor in the suicide, the gun-related suicides. Other countries don't factor in gun-related suicides when they present their numbers on gun violence, but we do, and so it throws
the numbers.
It throws all these numbers off. So then, why would they do that? Why would they want to take this 60% of gun-related suicides and factor that into the category of gun violence in America? And I don't want to just immediately believe the worst about them, but I have to assume that this is to inflate the numbers, to make things appear worse than they actually are, which is not to say that these mass shootings are not horrible. Right. They're completely horrible. They're completely tragic. I think every American, every rational, sane American wants an end to this. But it doesn't help when we're skewing numbers and inflating numbers and presenting data that really doesn't line up with what's actually happening.
And I can hear already, again, trying to play a little devil's advocate here, right? The person who believes that those numbers should be included, suicide numbers should be included, because if they didn't have that gun, they perhaps would have had a much lesser chance of killing themselves.
Possibly.
And immediately in my head, this is the way I think, is that, well, we also have to understand if we're going to use these numbers and just kind of jam them all together and say, here, we need a policy to address this, not all policies are going to address these categories the same. A certain gun control law is going to address perhaps the mass shootings, maybe lessen those, but it's not going to do much to suicides, perhaps.
Right.
And so I think we definitely need to think harder about what are the causes, right? What leads to a suicide? You know, you definitely hear a lot of talk more about mental health. What's the home life like? All that kind of stuff. And then with mass shootings, there's probably a lot of that included, but something more about access and whatnot. But I'm just saying, I don't think we should be very quick to just jumble all these numbers together, right? Because when you're talking about what policies are going to actually be instituted as a result, they might not be addressing the same causes. And so that's where I'm coming from.
And then also on top of that, like if the argument is, well, look how bad our gun homicides or gun violence is in America compared to other countries, well, then let's make sure that they're also including the suicide rate
Sure.
in their data, right?
Yeah, apples to apples, yeah.
So yeah, exactly right. You know, if the numbers are skewed and we're including, you know, suicide by gun in our gun violence data, and then we compare that to countries who don't include that information, it's not a fair comparison.
Yep. I think it's good. So this is really to, whenever you start hearing talks about how violent or gun violence is just rampant in America, worse than any other country, this is something to definitely be aware of.
Right.
And so then that leads us to our next argument that we usually hear touted, which is what we just need is common sense gun laws.
It baffles me. I have yet to really understand what common sense gun laws would do. And so therefore, how is it common sense? So to shine a light on this, first of all, criminals don't obey gun laws. That's just the fact. So all the school shootings that we've seen recently, all the mass shootings that we've seen recently, even the ones where the individual obtained the weapon legally, because they want to highlight that. Oh, he got that legally, right? Yeah, but then he broke the law with it.
Right.
He broke laws the minute he set his sighting, the minute he pointed that gun in a public place at an innocent individual. I mean, you're breaking gun laws.
Right.
So the concept that common sense gun laws will solve the problem doesn't really make sense, because these criminals aren't obeying the gun laws, even if they acquire the gun legally. Then on top of that, most mass shootings typically happen in a gun-free zone, and the criminals who have been forthright with their thought process have admitted that they chose those places because they knew that people weren't going to be armed. So yeah, if you know that everyone in this auditorium or in this school or in this area, if you know that they're all forbidden from carrying, then you've got easy targets, soft targets. It's a soft place, right? And so this idea that more gun laws, more restrictive gun laws. Well, how many signs can you put on a place on the door or in the facility to say no guns allowed? You can put those signs up all day long, and criminals are going to break the law. They're just going to go ahead and break those laws. Then also, it's important to understand that when they're talking about common sense gun laws, a lot of times what they're talking about are, criminalizing bump stocks and getting rid of, assault style guns, which no one can actually define.
Yes, I've seen this in action.
It's kind of like woman, we just don't know how to define this anymore. Like,
yes.
What is an assault style weapon? Like, what are we talking about?
Right.
And so, let alone, we don't have a real clear definition of what this is, but they want to ban them anyway, right?
Yes, it's rhetorically powerful when you hear the words assault style or weapon of war. It just brings images to a person's mind. Of course, it's intended to invoke fear. And so you don't want that near you.
Right.
Sure.
So what these people fail to understand, though, is that most gun-related homicides are committed with handguns.
Mm-hmm.
So they're easier to hide. They're easier to carry.
Yeah.
So when you look at the data, what you discover is that the largest percentage of gun-related homicides, and even the largest percentage of homicides in general, they're committed with people carrying handguns.
So the common sense behind these, proposed restrictions is the idea is, well, mass shootings really are the target. Because mass shootings really tend to make the national airwaves. It's not like for instance, Chicago always gets a bad rap, probably rightfully so, because they have so many shootings that are just regular homicide, where you just have somebody angry at somebody else, or it's gang related. But they have so many of those types of shootings, but it really is the mass shooting events that kind of take over the national airwaves.
Right.
But common sense gun laws try to step in and say, well, we just want to at least reduce the mass shootings. And what do we see there are the weapons that are typically used there are probably like those assault, quote unquote, style rifles. And so they want to really latch onto that and see if they can kind of abolish those. Now, I believe it's also worth being said that there are politicians on record stating as much, that it's kind of a foot in the door, if you will. If we can start here, then we can work our way into the lesser known, or the lesser kind of assault style, just the basic handguns, basically, right?
Yeah.
They will lead to kind of a ban on weapons in general.
Well, and not only that, but if those guns are still, available, mm-hmm. What's to stop a criminal from getting their hands on one?
Right.
So just because let's say they come along and say, okay, we're going to criminalize ARs. We're just gonna any AR rifle is you can't have one, right? Well, they're still out there. So are you going to tell me that criminals can't get a hold of one and then break that law too?
Yeah.
They're criminals. They're lawbreakers. So why do you think that passing a law is going to all of a sudden make them go, oh, this is illegal? Oh, I didn't realize this was illegal. Mm-hmm. I was just going to take it and go shoot people with it. But now that you've told me that that's illegal, I won't, right? It's just silly. All it does is really criminalize law-abiding citizens. It criminalizes those who actually would like an AR for their house, for home defense, would like one for hunting, would like one for, family protection, or just as a hobby to go have fun. So now these people have to be criminalized.
Yeah.
In an attempt to stop a criminal from doing criminal activities, which they're going to do if they can get their hands on it, right? So if the idea is that, well, at least if we can get them out of the hands of law-abiding citizens, then it'll be less available for the criminal. Well, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, and this is where I think that's one of the ways of thinking that is commonly misunderstood, and perhaps like from let's say from a gun control activist, where they will usually use kind of an emotional trigger, say, if we can just save one life. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, so they try to persuade you to buy into common sense gun laws, right? Other things that we haven't talked about are universal background checks, red flag laws that are now coming more and more into the conversation. And when regular citizens usually balk at this and say, hey, we don't want, that's like an invasion of privacy, we don't want that, right? Then gun control advocate will essentially say, do you want more deaths, essentially? Don't you want to save lives?
Right.
But I think this is where we're just talking past each other at this point, and I've been really trying to figure out what can you possibly say to kind of get on common ground here. And this, maybe we can try to clear some of this up, but it really comes down to, again, we both want there to be ultimately zero deaths.
Yes.
Like as the minimum amount of violence that we can, right? And the minimum amount of homicides.
Yes.
Now the question is, what policies will actually lead to that?
Right.
But you can't just pass a policy that says no more guns or no more violence, right? We already have laws on the books that murder, manslaughter.
Yes.
We have laws on the books.
That's a no-no.
Right. But people still commit that.
And then if you're the same group that is trying to defund the police, then sure, pass a law. Who's going to enforce it?
Right.
The very people who call for the defunding of the police are the first people to call the police the minute somebody misgenders them or uses the wrong pronoun. Mm-hmm. So who do you want to defend these common sense gun laws? Good guys with guns, right? But now there's not enough of them. I called the police here recently on some situation going on in my neighborhood, and the 311 person said, "Well, this isn't an emergency, so we're not sending the police out." And I said, "No, this is an emergency," and I explained it to her, and so she patched me over to 911, and they finally came out. But I mean, her first instinct was to discourage me from trying to get police to come into my neighborhood.
Sure. Yes.
Why? Well, because we've defunded the police. It's nonsense. And if the idea is, well, if we can just save one, okay, well, let's talk about that. The most recent FBI crime reporting information reveals that in 2020 there were 13,620 gun murders. Okay, and now think about that for a moment. What if all those people had a gun to defend themselves? Because the police weren't there to defend them. They couldn't afford personal security like so many of our Hollywood elites or politicians who walk around with a detail, a security detail, all armed, right?
Right.
We don't get that. We don't get that kind of security detail. I can't afford that. So, think about that, though. In 2020, there were 13,620 gun murders. In 2021, there were 1.67 million defensive uses of firearms. So 1.67, right? Well, more than 1 million defensive uses of firearms in 2021. What if those people weren't allowed to have those guns? Then that would represent women getting raped. That would represent men, being murdered or robbed. That would represent all kinds of bad things happening to good people because they didn't have that gun to pull out and defend themselves with. So 2021, more than 1 million people had to pull a gun and defend themselves.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of lives got saved because of that. And it's sad to say that, when somebody says, well, nobody needs an assault-style weapon. Nobody needs an assault-style weapon. Really? So let me get this straight. If, let's say, 5 guys decide to kick in my door one night and have their way, with whatever they want in our house, have their way with my wife, take whatever they want. If that were to happen, 5 guys. And we've seen videos of this, right? I mean, we've seen videos of home invasions where, you've got 5, 6 guys running into a home, and what should I do? I can take 1, 2 of them, just fist to fist. But 5 guys? And then in the dark with adrenaline pumping, I'm going to want a magazine with 30 rounds in it, ready to go. So, if my wife is out somewhere and she gets assaulted and someone, wants to rape her, I want her to be able to pull a pistol and shoot that person because they're a criminal and they're trying to, force themselves onto what would be a helpless woman.
Yeah.
But the minute she pulls a gun out, all of a sudden, she has the power over him.
Yeah.
So, you know, if it really is about saving just that one, well, in 2021, there were more than 1 million saved by the use of a gun.
Yeah, and I think that's very important information that you really don't hear much about, right? You definitely hear about the amount of homicides, gun violence, and whatnot, but I've never heard on any mainstream media channel about the number of defensive uses of firearms that were used to save, you know, on the order of 100x more lives than what they actually took in the previous year.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, the 13,000 is way, 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 way too much, and it's tragic for every life lost. And of course, we want to save at least one life. But that's what I'm getting at is the policies, you can't just think in terms of, we think this is going to prevent guns or, from being used in violent events. When it comes to policies, we have to think deeply about what are the unintended consequences as well. That's what I'm saying. Like with red flag laws, there are valid concerns about what kind of encroachment, are we allowing the federal government to get into a citizen's life, right? So all of these things have to be taken into account. Not only that, I think perhaps there's a lot more rhetorical power in the language being used by gun control advocates, right? Assault-style weapons, weapons of war. And I think that's where a lot of the conversations wind up people talking past each other because nothing is done to address, have you actually used a weapon? Have you actually fired a gun? Do you know the basic mechanics? I mean, we would all admit a gun is certainly a violent weapon. It is a forceful weapon, but that's its intended purpose. Yeah. But other questions need to come after that. How can we safely use a weapon? If you have training, can you become more proficient at using this weapon? It's not just a matter of this weapon can shoot bullets very fast, at a fast velocity. Yes. There's other things we can use at fast velocity that cause harm.
Vehicles?
Exactly. So now we now have to broaden our understanding about what exactly are we talking about here, what things actually wind up causing death. How can we, as people, prevent others from causing death to others, right? But I think we've let the language barrier, we've spoken about this before with cults, but with these policies, we've let the language barrier, I think, kind of grow too large here.
Well, it's like back in December, when the individual drove his car into a parade.
That's right, yep.
At that moment, that vehicle became an assault vehicle.
Mm-hmm. By definition, that's used elsewhere, yeah.
It was an assault vehicle. He used that vehicle to assault people, right, and run them down. And I haven't heard one argument from the left about how we need to ban cars. We need to get all the cars off the streets. If we can just save one at a parade, then no, you don't hear that. As a matter of fact, that story hit the news cycle and was gone within no time. They didn't want to focus on that. And yet, effectively, he drove his car into a parade, and then July 4th, this guy used his rifle, at a parade. Same basic murderous intent.
Yeah.
But they're not trying to ban cars. They're trying to ban rifles right now. Mm-hmm. And so the news cycle focuses in on one of these events and not the other. They're both tragic. They're both horrific. They both should have never happened. And I think we should all be appalled by criminals who engage in these behaviors. But we need to really punish the criminals and not, attack the car companies for creating vehicles large enough to run over people, right? Or gun companies who are, making assault-style rifles
or high-capacity magazines.
Yeah. It just seems, it seems like we're not focused on the right thing, and then typically the anti gun, the common sense gun law individual who wants to have stricter laws when it comes to gun owners. they're failing to take into consideration the fact that gun ownership is a constitutional right. This is straight up Second Amendment, Bill of Rights, constitutional right that we have as Americans, and I'm glad that our Supreme Court recognized this here recently. And just to be clear, the Second Amendment tells us that a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Mm-hmm. Shall not be infringed. I mean, it's so important to recognize the language here.
Yep.
So you've got, the importance of having a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Mm-hmm. So the Second Amendment here is all about Americans having the ability to defend themselves against tyrannical governments, right? But then goes on to just state the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Not just to keep them, but actually bear them, to actually carry them.
Yeah.
And that this amendment shall not be infringed.
So it's a negative way of stating it, that and really what it does is it strengthens it. It's basically saying the government really can't touch it. If they wanted to go the opposite way, and they would have started with regulations saying these are the only ways
right.
and scenarios in which you can keep and bear arms. But really what they did was just kind of blanket statement, blanket cover. You can keep and bear arms.
That's right.
It should not be infringed.
So then someone like a Biden comes along and, wants to make the argument that, the Second Amendment didn't allow citizens to purchase cannons.
He said it.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Can we read that quote?
Yeah. Here's the way
in a Biden voice.
I'll let you go for that.
I don't see the ellipses here.
Yeah. So here's what he said: the Second Amendment, from the day it was passed, because I think he was probably there, but from the day it was passed, limited the type of the people who could own a gun and what type of weapon you could own. You couldn't buy a cannon.
Come on, man.
You know the thing.
Just a bunch of malarkey.
This argument is malarkey.
It's malarkey. Yeah.
He promised no malarkey, but this is actually false. Independent Institute's Dave Coppell, he spoke to PolitiFact when they were fact-checking this whole thing. And here's what he said. He says, I am not aware of a ban on any arm in colonial America. So the colonizers, they could own a cannon if they could purchase one, right? Julianne Sweet was also interviewed by PolitiFact. She's the director of military studies at Baylor University. And here's what she said. It seems highly unlikely that there were restrictions on the private ownership, and she's speaking of cannons. So thanks, Julie.
And there, you can sense the. I don't want to be very certain about this. It seems highly unlikely.
It's highly unlikely, maybe, but probably not. So sorry, Biden, but yeah, you could own cannons then, and you can own cannons now.
Yeah.
So that this is something that he was incorrect about. And according to gun control advocates, the founding fathers who wrote the Second Amendment, well, they just couldn't imagine ever a day that there would be these rifles with, high capacity magazines and assault weapons and these sorts of things. They couldn't imagine that this would ever be the case. And so, clearly they wrote the Second Amendment not realizing how far it would go. And actually, listen, the Second Amendment was written in 1791. All right. So at that point in time, there already existed several guns that were capable of far faster firing rates than the typical muzzle loading flintlock of the era. So the argument typically goes that you have to muzzle load, and you have to set the ball, and you have to get the powder, and it was just tedious. And so they made the Second Amendment back when it took 5 minutes just to get off one shot, right? Mm-hmm. False. That is not true at all. And I'm probably going to mispronounce these, but there's the
Say it.
Chelbram magazine repeating flintlock. This was I think it was originally created in the early 18th century, maybe late maybe late 17th, but definitely 18th century.
It's almost for a century it was in action here.
Yeah, and it had 20 round magazines. The Lorenzoni repeating flintlock system, which included rifles, various rifles that, some held between, 6, others 10 shots.
Sounds like a good fella gun.
And then John Shaw was an American. He created different kinds of repeating guns, and just wanted to point out the Cookson volitional repeaters actually had 2 magazines with 7-shot capacities, and so if I understand it correctly, then you would have 14 shots.
Yeah.
With both magazines.
So it wasn't like you had to load every single shot every single time. They already had the capability of firing multiple rounds.
So these guns were already operational and accessible when the Second Amendment was written. Mm-hmm. And I've read our founding fathers. I've spent some time reading their writings. They were brilliant men. You don't think that they could look at, the design of guns and where it was going and imagine a day when there would be guns more powerful than what they had at that point in time, and they already had these repeaters? They couldn't think through that, in 10 years, in 100 years. Of course they could think that through. Yeah. And this would have been a good time to say, well, all the guns except for the repeaters. Yeah. You have the right to bear arms so long as they're not repeaters with magazines, because those were already existing, right? Those were already being used. The founding fathers were well aware that rifles with high capacity magazines were on the way, and yet they still assured every American that we have the right to keep and bear arms, and that this is a right that shall not be infringed. Mm. So that brings us to the Supreme Court decision recently that was recently made. And
yeah, because this amendment has been challenged since its inception, really. And you've had states experiment as to what kind of restrictions, what kind of regulations they can put on how and what kind of arms people can keep and bear.
Yeah, like California, who has the most restrictive gun laws and the most amount of mass shootings. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I was going to mention, a little while ago, is that we have to look at all the information available, right? And when we start looking at examples of states are free to do as they wish, and you do have states that are very heavy on gun regulations and restrictions. How are they doing? Right. In terms of gun violence? And just like we saw in Chicago mass shooting definitely took the national airwaves again, but this was just I don't want to say a blip, but there were plenty of July 4th holiday shootings that happened over that weekend.
So Illinois is number 6 on the gun restriction, how restrictive it is. So California's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're number 6 on restrictive laws against guns, right? They're number 2 as far as number of mass shootings.
Wow. Yeah.
How's it working?
Yeah. So the question is, they have the policies that a lot of gun control advocates wish or basically the whole nation would have. Yeah. But it's not solving the problem.
Doesn't solve the problem. Because criminals be criminals.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a tautology, but it's true.
Yes. Nice.
But so yeah, I mean, we come back to this Supreme Court decision, which I love.
Yes. This was just a very recent, I don't know exactly, but this is probably within the past couple of weeks. New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, Inc. versus Bruin. And here, where we had a ruling that was overturned, some statutes in New York State that allowed government entities to review and routinely deny applicants who applied for a concealed carry permit. So yes, New York is famous, one of these famous states that have very tight gun control restrictions. And so they essentially were telling their citizens, sure, you can possess a firearm, but you have to give us a really good reason as to why.
You have to have a good reason.
You have to go present yourself to the, whatever government entity and essentially make your case as to why you believe you should have a gun.
Right.
And so you can't even just get away with, I want to defend myself. What makes you think that you need to defend yourself?
Right.
So somebody wound up challenging New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, saying this is unconstitutional. There's a Second Amendment, and it's very clear. And so this was going to be, everybody's expecting this, just like Roe v. Wade. People were kind of sitting on the edge of their seats expecting this decision, and lo and behold, 6-3 majority. It actually withstood and upheld the Second Amendment. And so let's see what Justin Clarence Thomas, who's having the best week ever, let's see what he wrote in his concurrent opinion here.
And I'm not going to lie, I think I've got a man crush on Justice Thomas, but yeah, go for it.
Yes, so he says, we too agree and now hold, consistent with Heller and McDonald, which is something else to talk about, that the Second and 14th Amendment protect an individual's right to carry a handgun for self-defense outside of the home.
It gets better.
Yes. And so in a footnote, and this is probably a quote that's been making the rounds, but in a footnote, he has this kind of this takedown here. He mentions the constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense is not a second-class right subject to an entirely different body of rules than the other Bill of Rights guarantees.
Boom.
Yep. Roasted. So he can't be any clearer here, is that there's a Second Amendment. It has clear wording, and it's very broadly held, and you can't treat it as a second-class right.
And I believe this is a footnote because I think he made the same statement like a few years ago. I forget exactly when, but yeah, it's just such a classic Clarence Thomas, statement. The guy's just smooth.
Yes.
He's a smooth operator.
Yeah, he didn't used to talk much, but now he's kind of just letting it all out now.
I love it.
Yeah, so
I love it.
But yeah, like we said, this Second Amendment really has been challenged many times, and with the recent Heller decision that solidified an individual's right to bear arms, not just kind of well, it's only for the military being required. But now that was upheld. I forget what year, but now this recent ruling just further protects the rights brought to us by the Second Amendment here.
Yeah, and so, clearly our founding fathers intended for Americans to be able to defend themselves. We have the Declaration of Independence, which guarantees the unalienable or the God-given rights to our life, to our freedom, our liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when you look into even their writings and even the pastoral messages that led up to the Declaration, then property is also commonly included: life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Which is why, like castle laws are so important, so that a person can feel the freedom to defend their property while they're at their home or in their car. So clearly this is a right. And according to our founding fathers, this is an unalienable right, which means that this is not something that the government grants, but rather the government is called to protect.
Yes.
So the government's role is not to grant us these rights. These rights come from God. And then the government is raised up to then protect these rights from tyrants. So whenever I see, leaders coming along and saying things like, well, it wasn't intended to have a cannon, and these sorts of things, I'm just kind of like, whoa, what's your agenda? Yeah. What's your goal here? Or the states and the governors and legislatures who want to come along and start toying around with shall not be infringed. Yep. All these public servants in government swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, which includes the Bill of Rights and the rest of the amendments. Yep. And so if you swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, and your job is to protect my right to keep and bear arms, and that this shall not be infringed upon. It just shocks me to see how many of these government officials are so quick, like Beto, Robert Francis O'Rourke, who likes cultural appropriation. He loves people to call him Beto. But here's a guy who promised that he's coming for our ARs, right? Well, hold on a second. Didn't you swear an oath?
Yeah.
To uphold the Constitution? So with that, we can clearly see that our founding fathers intended for us to have this right to protect our life, our liberty, our property, and our posterity, and our pursuit of happiness, right? But then, just because they said this is a right from God, doesn't actually prove that it is, right?
Correct. And more on that at 10 p.m. I'm kidding. But yes, before we jump into that, let me take a break here and address our audience. You're watching Studio 118 on YouTube. We appreciate you tuning in. We're streaming here live at Calvary South Austin. And we'd love to have you over as a guest. We meet here on Sunday mornings at 9:15 a.m. and 11:15 a.m., as well as Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. If you have any questions about who we are, what we do, what we teach, feel free to call us at 512-576-5433. Or you can also jump on our website. The easy address there is csa.church, and you can check out some of our messages and also look at what we believe. But also, if you're interested in checking out our previous episodes here on Studio 118, we invite you to subscribe to our Studio 118 YouTube channel. There, you can find numerous episodes that we've done in the past. As we mentioned, we've talked about abortion. We got 2 episodes on that. We've talked about other religious systems and cults and how they differ from Christianity. So we got a whole plethora of topics that we've talked about before. So,
do you know what a plethora is?
I don't really know. I just heard it. But yes, we invite you to drop your questions there on the live chat, say hi, and also drop your questions for our Q&A session after our discussion here. But we've just finished discussing, we're talking about should and can the church have weapons and use weapons. And right now we've really just been talking about, on a high level, about just really laying the groundwork as to what, culturally at least, the conversation is surrounding guns and gun rights.
Right.
And so we've actually said, okay, well, at least to a very large extent, it is a constitutional right, shall not be infringed. The data seem to further clarify that, hey, there's different issues going on here in terms of what gun violence actually is. And then we've also raised questions about, well, what policies will actually do this, and also tackled some common gun control myths, if you will, the popular ones that really make the waves on social media. So hopefully that's some good information for you all. But now, as Bunjee brought up, yes, it is a constitutional right, Second Amendment there, 1791, but were the founding fathers correct in their assumption that this is one of those God-given unalienable rights? And here's now where we're diving into the deep end of the pool and saying, okay, let's now think about this as Christians. Yes, lots of Christians out there, lots of gun-toting Christians, lots of gun-loving Christians. Are they right? Do they have some sort of biblical basis to believe that they can faithfully own guns and use them to protect themselves? What would Jesus do? How about that? Huh?
What would Jesus do? What gun would Jesus carry?
Yeah. But first, maybe we can just consider, in general, what kind of picture does the Bible give us in terms of, is there violence? Is there talk about war and use of weapons and use of force, violent force, that kind of stuff? I think I'm kind of a leading question there, but I think the answer is clearly yes.
Oh, yeah. And we even find God telling nations to go to war, mm-hmm. and to wipe out entire, nations.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible to consider, the battles that are recorded in the Old Testament. And, there can be those who quickly say, well, we live in a different dispensation, we live in the age of grace, and But before we advance to that level, let's just take a moment just to consider some of the things that happen in the Old Testament. I mean, we literally see God raising up raising up Israel to go and wipe out, a sinning nation that was engaging in all manner of sexual immorality and bestiality and sacrificing their children to Molech and these sorts of things. And God would just raise up a nation. Sometimes he would raise up Israel. Sometimes he would raise up another nation like the Babylonians to come and punish Israel. Yep. So it wasn't uncommon for God to raise up a nation and tell them to take up arms and to go and punish another people group.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that this fact about wars of conquest in the Bible, it's typically brought up from the skeptic side to make a claim that the God of the Bible doesn't exist because of this, or that the Bible is somehow false because of this, right? But yes, we do readily acknowledge it's in the Bible. There are times where God himself has called on nations to go and enact judgment by wiping certain nation states out of the picture, out of driving them out of the land. And he tells them, don't leave anybody standing, man, woman, or child, even the livestock. And so for instance, we have here wars of conquest, Exodus chapter 33, where God is telling his people, and I will send my angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanite and the Amorite and the Hittite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite. And then further on in Numbers chapter 33, giving a little bit more clarification, verse 51, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you have crossed the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, destroy all their engraved stones, destroy all their molded images, and demolish all their high places. You shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land and dwell in it, for I have given you the land to possess. And so the connection here is that God in one statement is telling them, my angel, and I will do this for you. I will drive them out. But he's using the people of Israel to do that.
Yep.
Using them as a tool.
Take up weapons, sometimes trumpets. The Lord clearly presents us with a case for just war theory, which is, based on the idea that, there is a time when the only just thing to do is to go to war, take up arms against another nation. And if their sins are so wicked, and that's really what God is dealing with here, the skeptic or the atheist or the person who is opposed to the God of the Bible, who uses this as an argument against the God of the Bible, fails to recognize that justice is holy. Justice is based on God's holiness. And if your standard of the kind of God you might accept, well, that God just always has to be loving, always has to be merciful, always has to be, never once would ever punish anyone. Well, hold on a second. If someone broke into your house and stole your property, if somebody murdered your family and did all kinds of unspeakable evils, against you, against your wife, wouldn't you want justice? Wouldn't you want that person to be punished? Wouldn't you want a judicial system to come along and exact justice? And I think the average person, the rational person, would say, yes, of course, I would want that. Well, then why would we expect God to be any different? Wouldn't we expect him to engage in just war against nations that were engaging in all sexual immorality, including bestiality, and corrupting their animals, or throwing their children, their newborn babies, into the fires of Molech, in the hopes that they might get good crops or blessings from their false gods? Of course, we should expect a holy, righteous God to come along and engage in just war. And the way that he does this is by raising up another nation to come in and punish. But then, in the story of Jonah, we also see God giving a nation, Nineveh, the opportunity to repent before raising up a nation to come in and wipe them out. And I'm assuming that then becomes a standard feature of who God is, that God always gives people an opportunity to repent first, and when they won't, then he calls for a just war against the nation that won't repent.
Yeah, you look at even in the story of the conquest of Jericho.
Yeah.
He allowed Rahab to escape and her family.
Yep.
Because she clearly admitted, we've heard stories. Everybody's fearful. We know who you guys are and the God you serve. I believe he's real. Me and my family believe he's real. We want to serve that God.
Yep.
And through that repentance, that led a way for her family to escape to safety, right?
Yeah.
Not only that, but God was very clear that, part of just war theory is that war should actually be the last resort.
Yes.
By any means that you can, you should always try to resolve the conflict without the use of violent force. And with God clearly telling even the Israelites, I've been patient for 400 years. Basically, the cup of my wrath is full, and it's been filling up for 400 years for these guys. I've been giving them this chance throughout these 4 centuries to repent. And what they've done is just further get into their horrible, horrible religious, rituals, which included bestiality and sacrificing of children.
It's incredible.
Even talking about how the land in which they possess, they will vomit them out. It was somehow like the land itself was suffering as a result of them possessing it.
And then there's, biblically speaking, there are verses about the blood guilt of when innocent blood is shed, that blood enters into the ground, and there is a blood guiltiness of the land that God will basically settle accounts regarding. And so it's incredible to consider that the God who is ready to save, the God who is ready to forgive, the God who is ready to receive those who repent, is also the God who determines to completely wipe out a nation that will not repent. God help America.
Yeah, and even before all these nation states became a thing, I think even as early as right after Noah landed the ark on Mount Ararat, and I think one of the first commandments that was given was basically the idea of capital punishment. Is if man sheds another man's blood, then his blood will be required of him, basically. So the idea that life is of most importance here, and that it has so much moral value that if you take it without cause, if you take it murderously, then your life, you've basically have given up your right to live. That's how serious.
Yeah. And speaking of Mount Ararat, there's another mountain, Mount Sinai, and that's where God tells Moses, "Thou shalt not murder."
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, most people quote it as kill.
Yep.
And then, well, how can this God say don't kill and then turn around and call for the killing of all these people, right? Well, he didn't say don't kill.
King Jimmy did.
Well, King Jimmy got it wrong.
King Jimmy got it wrong. Yeah, that's true.
So, what he's saying is thou shalt not murder.
Yes.
That's different from killing.
Yes.
When you look at the just punishment, of the death penalty. If there is absolute evidence that someone has murdered other people or another person, then according to the just decision of God, that person has forfeit their life and deserves the death penalty. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. This is what God has said, and I don't know better than God. Yeah. I don't know better than my Creator. So, and I'm certainly not more holy than He is. I'm not more righteous than my Creator. So when He says that, and shows Himself as a God of justice and a God of war at times, and when there's a just cause for it, then He's right. He's right because He's God and He is the standard of righteousness. And so the people of God would do well to realize that, there's a time when God raises up His people, for a just cause. And sometimes that's war. And that's why David even rejoices in Psalm 144. It's verse 1 where he says, and David was a king of war. Solomon, his son, was a king of peace.
Yep.
But David was a man of war. And he says here in Psalm 144, blessed be the rock, blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think I was watching Saving Private Ryan recently, and I think one of the snipers, basically that's his mantra. Basically,
no, was it?
Yeah, when he's getting ready.
I have to revisit that one.
Yeah,
that's a rough opening there.
Yep.
But yeah, so here's David saying that God was the one who trained his hands for war and his fingers. He was a shepherd that God raised up to be king, and God is the one who gave him the ability to defeat Goliath and then all of Israel's enemies, to create a place of peace, for Solomon his son to rule and reign over.
And as we're talking about this, right, I'm trying to put myself in another person's shoes, right, a person who's just not buying it, and I'm trying to think what would they balk at, right? And I think the rub here would be, why would God even allow such violence to be committed, and why would he be on the approving end of this, right? Why would he approve of such violence from one individual to another? And I think you're starting to brush the surface of that, is where you're saying that God has all these attributes, and somehow they must be reconciled. But at the same time, he's also dealing with very sinful creatures, us as humans. And how is he working out his grand will, if you will, through all of this?
I will.
Yeah, I will. So, yeah, how would you explain to a person is that, violence is permitted?
Yeah, and I think that, we have to then understand that there is an aspect of vengeance in God's love. There is an aspect of punishment within justice. In order for him to be a just judge, then he also must be able to pass the perfect sentence or the perfect justice or the perfect punishment that fits the crime, right? And so all that has to be true. And still yet, there will be those who will come along and say, yeah, but this is all Old Testament stuff. And now we're in the New Testament, or we're in the church age, or we're in the dispensation of grace. And so the time for these wars of conquering, this time of God's justice in that sort of way, where he raises up a nation to conquer another nation, that day is over. Now Jesus has come. Now we've been called to be peacemakers, and so that would be like if I were on the pacifist side of things, then I would that would be the argument that I would make, which is that no, in the New Testament we're called not to make war, but to make peace, right? So, for example, Paul here in Romans chapter 12, he says, repay no one evil for evil, have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. And then Hebrews chapter 12, Paul, or possibly, the author, possibly somebody else,
anonymous,
but this author goes on to say, pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. So, so again, we find a call towards peace in the Scripture. We even see James. He says that where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. And then he says this, he says, the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So we find, several calls to peace here. Even Jesus in Matthew 5 says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. So we clearly see a standard here in the New Testament of be a peacemaker. Do your best to be at peace with people. And that this is something that God is calling us to do here in the church age. Yeah. So is it possible that in the dispensation in which we live, that now there's no longer a place for Christians to say, like, own guns?
Yeah. Or ever use them.
Right.
Take up arms to defend oneself or others.
Yeah. Are we called to, just be pacifists who put away the sword, so to speak? Well,
are there So yeah, again, the way I would think is that, is this the totality of the story, right? Because obviously these verses are there, no denying that. And so yes, the command is there to live peaceably as much as is possible with you.
Peace out.
Peace out.
Just give peace a chance.
Are there other passages or verses, even from Jesus, where he seems to indicate there's this tension? Maybe not tension's not the right word, but perhaps just a different context in which we can understand this.
Well, I think, even just further building the case against weapons, we see the story of Peter drawing his sword against against those who came to arrest Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? And John tells us in John 18 that Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. Now, I'm assuming he was going for the throat, and the guy ducked and lost an ear in the process. I doubt he was doing this. I'm guessing he's like, he's coming in, with the hatchet.
This is also the guy that wanted to firebomb people, right?
No. That's Peter.
Yeah,
that was you're talking about the Sons of Thunder, James and John. Okay. Yeah, no, this is
other people.
This is Peter, and so the servant's name was Malchus. And Peter ended up saying he was sorry, and Malchus was like, "What? I can't hear you." But so Jesus says to Peter, "Put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me?" Mm-hmm. Then the detachment of troops and the captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him, and they led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. So Jesus here tells him, "Put your sword away. I'm going to accept, what the Father has determined," right? And in Matthew's account, in Matthew 26, Jesus says to him, "Put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword." And from that, we get those who live by the sword die by the sword. That's where this is based off of, right? And again, we find even Jesus suggesting that his disciples are called to be pacifists to some degree. In John 18, we find Pilate entering the praetorium, and this is when Jesus is hauled before Pontius Pilate, and Pilate asks him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And then Jesus answers him. He says, "Are you speaking for yourselves about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answers, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews, but now my kingdom is not from here." So, right there, he's not saying, rise up and take out the Romans, though they were deserving of that kind of just punishment. Mm-hmm. And yet Jesus says, no, my servants aren't going to fight you. If I wanted them to, they would. Yeah. But they won't. My kingdom's not of here.
So he's saying, "Blessed are the peacemakers, live in peace, don't fight. My kingdom's not of this world. This is not where fighting belongs," basically.
And then he went on to allow, the Romans to crucify him at the order. So the Romans crucified him at Pontius Pilate's order, at the request of the high priest and the religious leaders of Israel. So is that our model? Are we to become these pacifistic, people that just Jesus says turn the other cheek, and so we let someone smack us on the one side of the face and just, okay, you can hit me on the other side as well. Is that what he's intending?
Well, I would say this, that at the very least that we have notable pacifists who, one could argue that sort of thinking and worldview worked well for them, right? Like I'm thinking of MLK Jr. Mm-hmm. We have Gandhi. We have the religious denomination known as the Mennonites, and also the Quakers, and probably Seventh-day Adventists as well. So these are notable. They're pacifists through and through,
right? Except that the Mennonites, I think they're all about the patriarchy, aren't they?
Oh yeah, sorry, crossed out, canceled.
They're not womanites.
Yep. Well, they have two N's. Super Mennonites.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
It's kind of like Menchaca.
By Menon.
Yeah, I mean, these are definitely interesting, people and groups that kind of in that Hacksaw Ridge kind of way where, someone's saying, I'm not going to take up a gun. I'm not going to fight these fights. I'm going to be a pacifist, which is just basically in opposition to war, violence as a means of settling disputes. And pacifism is, refusal to bear arms on moral or religious grounds. And there are Christians in the church today who just refuse to own a gun, think that, it's not their place to take up arms against anybody else. And, if they were to be drafted or required to go and join the army for the purpose of, fighting World War III, they would, become conscientious objectors, on religious grounds. And is that the route that we're supposed to take? Is that where we're supposed to end up as complete pacifists? And, every Christian should get rid of their guns?
Yeah, and that's based on what you've shared so far, right? If that were the entire story, then I think you could probably make a good case. Mm-hmm. But is that the totality?
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly see Jesus, presenting another aspect of himself. I'm remembering the time when, he's cleansing the temple and he's like flipping over tables. Yeah. Whipping. And he forms a whip out of cords, and he's thrashing the animals and the people and chasing them out of the temple. I mean,
got heated.
That's intense.
Yeah.
That is intense.
Yeah.
And in Matthew 10, he says, "Do not think that I came to bring peace on earth."
Okay. Huh?
"I did not come to bring peace, but a sword, for I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be those of his own household." So he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers."
Yeah.
But I didn't come to bring peace. How do you square this? How do you square that circle?
Yeah.
Yeah. And remember, he told Peter to put his sword away, right?
Yes.
Well, in Luke 22, he says to them, "When I sent you without money bag, knapsack, and sandals, did you lack anything?" So they said nothing. Then he said to them, "But now he who has a money bag, let him take it, and likewise a knapsack. And he who has no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. For I say to you that this which is written must still be accomplished in me." And he was numbered with the transgressors, for the things concerning me have an end. So speaking of, dying on the cross for our sins.
Yeah.
And then they said to him, "Look, Lord, here are 2 swords." And he said to them, "It is enough."
Double packing.
So I've got a sword for each hand. Is that good, Lord?
Right. That's enough.
That's enough.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what we take from here, at least, the literal sword that he's asking them to keep with him, he probably foresaw that in some of these not so friendly places that they were going to venture into, they might have to defend themselves, or perhaps robbers along the way,
or open a mail, open a letter,
glorified mail. Perhaps.
Who can say?
Yeah. But yeah, so it seems obvious there that he's allowing them, at least for the purposes of self-defense.
Yeah.
Right.
So he tells us that he came to give his disciples peace.
Yes.
Unlike what the world gives, that he gives us true peace.
Yeah.
But he didn't bring peace to the world. Mm. So in other words, if I understand this correctly, Jesus is saying, those who trust in me will enjoy peace, but those who don't trust in me won't have peace, and as a result, families will be divided over this.
Yeah.
Those who enjoy the peace of Jesus will be on one side of this division, and those who don't have peace with Jesus will be on the other side. And there might be times when you better get your sword. Mm-hmm. Johnny, get your gun.
Yeah. Now now looking forward into a future time.
Yeah.
Where there'll be
It ramps up quick.
Yeah, this is Jesus coming back, and he describes in very clear terms how he's coming back.
Well, and before the return, what we find are seals giving way to trumpets, giving way to bowls, right? Yes. By the time of the sixth seal, which is very early in the time of tribulation, you start seeing the wrath of God being poured out upon the planet, which includes, fiery hailstones falling to the earth, pestilence, plagues of all kinds, and, demons that are invading. And I mean, it's just like the wrath of God is being poured out for the majority of the tribulation. So at least halfway through the first half of the tribulation, and then the second half is called the Great Tribulation, and things just continue ramping up worse and worse until the scene here in Revelation chapter 19.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and read that here in Revelation 19, starting in verse 11. John wrote, "Now I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. And he who sat on him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges and makes war."
Wow.
"His eyes were like a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should strike the nations. And he himself will rule them with a rod of iron. He himself treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God."
Intense.
Wowzer. Yup. Yeah, when when he's coming back, it's no joke.
No.
Yeah.
I saw a bumper sticker one time that said, "Who would Jesus bomb?"
Yes.
And I wanted to pull up and just say,
Revelation
go
19.
read Revelation 19, because his return, I mean, and Psalms 2, describes this in even greater detail, where you see the kings of the earth preparing for war against Israel and then attempting to attack the Son of God.
Mm.
And it's not going to work out well. The God of the Bible says he's going to laugh at them, mm-hmm. and he'll hold them in derision. And here we have, John's description, his vision of this, and we find this sharp sword coming out of his mouth. Now, this reminds me, when they came to arrest Jesus, they basically said, "We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth," and he said, "I am." Mm-hmm. And the temple soldiers all fell to the ground.
Oh, that's right.
So with the word of his mouth, "I am," which is the name of God. He just says the name of God, "I am." And the temple guard just drops to the ground. Then they get back up. That's when Peter pulls the sword and tries to take a swipe, right? And it's just like, bro, it's unnecessary. Yep. You saw that the Lord Jesus is so powerful that just with the very name of God, they fell to the ground. So when I see here that out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, I'm not imagining a literal sword, but the Bible is actually called the sword of the Spirit.
Right.
And when we rightly divide all of these texts together and see, with the word of his mouth, he dropped the temple guard. The word of God is the sword of the Spirit. And now we see the sharp sword coming out of his mouth. He's just going to be speaking the word of God, mm-hmm. to these kings and these armies that have surrounded Jerusalem, that have been led down to the valley of Megiddo and are engaging in this final war, that as he comes and invades the planet with the church following him on white horses,
yeah,
that he's just going to be speaking the word of God and basically wasting them all. And that's why it says that he himself treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. That imagery comes out of the Old Testament, where the idea is that he's basically, that the people are like grapes.
Yep.
and he's just treading them down.
Wow.
And we learn that the blood will be up to the horse's bridle.
Yeah.
Which is not to say like it's going to be liquid all the way up to that level, but rather there's just going to be so much blood that it's just splashing up. Wow. Incredible scene. And it doesn't seem very pacifistic.
Right. This is the same Jesus, right?
I'm not feeling the pacifism here.
Jesus meek and mild? It's not him?
It doesn't. I mean, there's meekness here, but because, there's going to be people who survive. Mm-hmm. And they will enter into the millennial kingdom. Yeah. And he's going to rule them with a rod of iron. So there is a level of meekness in that he doesn't just wipe everybody out. But as far as those who gathered in Megiddo, in the valley of Megiddo for Armageddon, yeah, they're all getting wiped out.
Yeah. So to kind of tie it into what we're ultimately getting at here is we're considering, the Second Amendment and how it's considered, at least by the Founding Fathers, to be a God-given, unalienable right.
Yes.
And that's the question we're ultimately trying to answer is, well, is there something in the Scriptures, some sort of principle, some sort of theme throughout the Scriptures that is allowing us to believe that owning weapons or defending oneself or using violent force from time to time is allowable? And based on the Scriptures that I think we've been sharing so far, we seem to have two notions here. One is definitely a clear encouragement to live peaceably, to be peacemakers. And even within, this is not just a New Testament concept, but even within the Old Testament, how God has been long-suffering with the nations, even with the nation of Israel. But at a certain point, God's the cup of wrath was filled, and judgment needed to be enacted. And God used people to enact that judgment. Jesus himself, he speaks not only of being peacemakers, but at the end, he himself is going to come and he's going to be prepared for war. He's going to make war, and he's going to destroy nations at the end. And so we do see these two concepts, and that's the question is, they're there. How can we reconcile this? And I think it ultimately comes down to is, like you were talking about earlier, how do we conceive of God? What are God's attributes, and how do they work together?
It's a really good question, and I think there is a clear balance when we consider something that Paul wrote again in Romans chapter 12. I know that we already considered it in brief, but there was a few more verses that we need to consider here. So this is Romans 12. He says, "Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." So the concept here is that it's really not our place to try to get revenge on people. Now, that's different from justice.
Yes.
Vengeance really, in a human context is more about, let me get one over on you. Yeah. Let me get you back in a way that wouldn't be true justice. Only God really knows how to lock down true justice, right? But that's not to say we shouldn't use our judicial system. So clearly, God's not against the judicial system, because the very next chapter in Romans 13, he goes on to explain that the government is raised up for the punishment of evildoers. That's exactly what follows these verses, is Paul's description of what the government is here for, which is for civil issues at a secular level. So Paul's saying, hey, don't get in the business of trying to repay evil for evil. That's not your place. And as long as it's possible, if it's possible, as much as depends on you, right? So if it's you have two qualifiers here, right? Yeah. If it's possible, sometimes it's not possible, right? Mm-hmm. If 5 guys kick in my front door, trying to take my property, trying to harm my family, it's not possible to be at peace with that person. They're there for the wrong reasons. And I'm going to defend my family. I'm going to defend my property. So I'm not going to kick in your door. I'm not going to engage in a home invasion at your house, because that's dependent on me, right? That if it's possible, as much as depends on me, I'm not going to come kick in your door. I'm not going to grab my guns and come to your house and be an evildoer. If you come to my house, you know, and you go past the beware of dog sign, you know, nice. Beware of Bunjee. Yeah. Beware of Bunjee. I bite. You know, so you know, but I'm not spoiling for a fight. I'm not going out and causing trouble. I'm going to try to be at peace with everyone. And if you want to be at peace with me, I want to be at peace with you. I'm a pacifist at that point. Yeah. Right. I'm not trying to start trouble with anybody. Now, when I was younger, I was, you know, always spoiling for something, but now I realize the error of my ways. I realize that was evil, and I would rather overcome evil with good if I can. So it's important to let the government do the government's job, so long as they're punishing evildoers and not the evildoers themselves. Yes. When the government becomes the evildoers, that's another problem right there, and that's why the Second Amendment has given us the right to bear arms, just in case we have to overthrow an evil government, right? So that is a very important part of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment protects us from an evil government. Yeah. But furthermore, here's what Paul writes in 1 Timothy. He says, if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Wow. What kind of provision are we talking about? Life, liberty, property, the pursuit of happiness, all the unalienable rights that the founding fathers pulled out of the scriptures. And you know, you can go listen to a study that I taught. Spent several weeks looking at America's Patriot pastors, looking at the sermons presented by the pastors that provided content to the founding fathers, who then went and wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and, you know, all of our founding documents. But you can see where the concepts of life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness are found in these sermons that are, you know, just rich in Scripture, as they were attempting to establish a biblical basis for the form of government that they developed, right? But here, when we look at what Paul is saying, if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, so that provision has to do with food, shelter, protection. When I read this, I read, if anyone doesn't protect his own, if anyone doesn't protect his family from evildoers, he's denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So this brings me to the point of owning a gun is not evil. Owning a gun is no more evil than owning a car or a television or a computer or a hibachi, George Foreman grill. You know, just these are all just inanimate objects. Yeah. And like, I can use my computer to do incredible things serving the Lord, right? I can also use my computer to do evil things and look at things that I shouldn't look at, right? This thing by itself isn't doing anything until I take control of it. Right. Same with a gun. Yeah. The gun sits there until someone picks it up. Now, what's the intent of that individual? Exactly. If the intent of that individual is to protect their family and to protect their property, to protect their life, their liberty, and their pursuit of happiness, nothing evil about that. Nothing unbiblical about that. Yep. Those who would say, well, Jesus said turn the other cheek. I mean, he's talking about an insult. He's talking about, if someone insults you, what does it matter? Let him insult you all day long. It doesn't even matter. But if someone tries to come in and take my life, my family's life, our property, someone who would try to stop me from the pursuit of happiness, I have a God-given right to protect that.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, if I pick up a gun with the intent to defend my life, my liberty, and my pursuit of happiness, and my property, and my family, and all of that, there's nothing unbiblical about that. There's nothing unloving about that. There's nothing evil about that. I'm stopping a criminal from doing something evil that the law of the land basically, defends my right, to do that, right? So then that brings you to Romans chapter 13. And in Romans 13, we find Paul, he's...
If I may, while you're finding it,
Yep.
I did want to, give a glimpse into that very scenario that you're talking about is talked about in the Old Testament in Exodus 22. Check this out. As he's giving out the law to the people of Israel, Exodus 22, God is telling his people, if a thief is caught in the act of breaking into a house and is struck and killed in the process, the person who killed the thief is not guilty of murder. But if it happens in daylight, the one who killed the thief is guilty of murder. And the idea here is tying it into the Romans 12 is as much as is possible, as is dependent on you, live peaceably. In the dead of night, when you're trying to figure out what's going on, who's in my house, then according to this verse, it's more than justifiable to take that life because you don't know what's going on. In the daylight, it's more obvious to picture who's the culprit, try to get them out of your property by some other means. So as much as is possible is dependent on you. Live peaceably with all men. And
right.
that very scenario that you're raising here is defended here in Scripture.
Yeah, I can't imagine any law-abiding gun owner wanting to shoot somebody.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get at.
What a horrible.
Right.
Imagine living the rest of your life knowing that you took someone's life or that you shot someone and maimed them.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to live with that. I'd rather not. I'd rather just be at peace with people. I'd rather just enjoy my life and enjoy my property and protect my family. And I'd rather avoid a situation where I'm put in a position where I have to defend my wife or that sort of a scenario. I would rather not deal with it. I'd rather not deal with that struggle that I had to go there, that had to happen in my house, right? And yet I would have a much easier time living with that than, I let my wife get raped. Mm-hmm. I allowed, I allowed my wife to be murdered, or that would be even harder to live with, right? So in this, worst case scenario, it's like I'd much rather just protect my wife mm-hmm. and protect my loved ones and my family. I'd rather live with that than I didn't.
Yeah, and I fear that, what you just spoke on, that's missed in a lot of the conversations that at least I see going on, is where I see people who essentially are afraid of guns. And I fear that they believe of people who own guns is that they have this sort of unhealthy, passion for guns, that they just can't wait to use them and they just want to use them at every possible instance. But I think the general attitude for gun owners is, I hope to never have to use this.
Yeah.
This really is a serious, deadly weapon, and I hope to never have to use this because of what's going to come after.
Right.
You think people actually want to go and look for trouble and saying, okay, I want to use this gun because I just love the way it feels in my hand? Sure, there's people that love going to the gun range, love doing other things with guns, competition, whatnot, just using it for recreational purposes.
Right.
But when it comes to actually using it in deadly force, think of even police officers. It is something that strikes to the soul, damages it perhaps to a certain extent, to have to use it on another individual. So I think that's something I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that is definitely missing in the conversation, where people never really talk about, like, we don't want to use guns ever, but they are a necessary, I think, piece in order to establish the security of one's property. Yeah.
Yeah. This brings us to then, why do we see the constantly increasing rate of gun violence happening? And I'm not talking about people who use a gun to commit suicide, which that is its own tragedy. And, and I would just even make the appeal to anybody watching that, if you are having suicidal thoughts, that I would love for you to contact the church here and just, spend some time talking with you and just considering, the situation in your life and, considering some of the solutions to deal with some of that. So suicide is just not the solution. It's not the solution for you, and it leaves behind a bunch of people who are hurt by your absence. So I don't want to just pass that by and not address that and not present that invitation that, if you are having suicidal thoughts, just call the church here, 512-576-5433, and let's connect and just deal with some of those issues. But as far as why are we seeing an increase in actual gun violence where, like with July 4th, or with Uvalde or all these different situations, what is the situation? Well, I think Paul addresses it here in Romans 13, that rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister, talking about the government. He is God's minister to you for good, but if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister and avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. So the concept here being that evildoers should be afraid of the government. Evildoers should be afraid of the punishment that will come if they break the law. And so with that, I just think that we currently are watching our government failing to wield the sword. They're wielding the sword in vain, so to speak. And one reason why is because in a lot of our Democrat-run cities, where we see judges that are they have a revolving door policy. You even see people who are engaging in criminal acts being sprung from the pokey, so to speak, by Democrat leaders, because they engaged in the right riot. Yeah. They burned down the right buildings, and so we're going to pay their bail. You see, globalist judges that just will not prosecute crime. It's just, and then on top of that, you see these people calling for the defunding of police, and then governors, like our own Adler here in town, just moving forward with that plan, and now you've got this huge influx of people running from blue states to a red state like Texas, and a lot of them come here to Austin, not realizing that it's kind of blue here, and so with all of that, you see this increase of people, but you're not really seeing an increase of police, and law enforcement. So if criminals aren't afraid of the government, if they're not afraid of law enforcement, if they're not afraid of the punishment, well, then of course we're going to see more and more of this sort of violence. So, one of the major solutions that for the people who are calling for, gun control, well, think it through, people. Think it through. It's very clear. We need stricter laws against criminals, not against guns. The guns aren't doing anything until they get picked up by a criminal.
Or actual enforcement of the laws that are already on the books.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And I think that's one thing we've seen.
A stricter enforcement, yes.
Yeah, one thing we've seen with these recent mass shootings is we start looking into who was this person, and they had but they've had several instances where this should have been raised to a certain level, or they should have already been prevented from owning a firearm. But somehow nobody enforced whatever law that was already on the books.
Yeah.
And they were able to obtain a firearm legally, and they went and committed mass murder.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of times some of these shooters have been already investigated by the FBI. They've already been exposed. They've already been reported to local law enforcement. A lot of times there were actual red flags along the way, yeah. and they did nothing about it.
Yep.
So that's,
I think that's where, again, this might even be tied into our politics and Christianity episode that we've done previously. Is how do we think about politics? And what I'm getting at is every time we consider what policy, if any, should be enacted in order to reach a certain goal, we have to think broader than just, is this going to lessen, decrease murders?
Yeah.
Okay. If that's your only goal, but then you're not thinking about the unintended consequences, is this going to violate other unalienable rights that we have on the books already?
Right.
Then we need to, let's take a step back. Let's go back to the drawing board and consider, number one, is this actually going to solve the problem? If we see it being enacted somewhere else that's not working, or in other nations that aren't working?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because Brazil actually provides us with a very
really
useful...
went for that one, yeah.
They provide us with a useful case study that helps us to see how gun ownership actually affects the crime rate, and it's not what the progressives are saying. The progressives are saying, hey, limit guns, take guns away, get rid of guns, and that'll solve the problem, right? Well, it was back in 2019 when their newly elected president, he made it easier for law-abiding citizens to keep arms for self-defense inside the home. And within 3 years, the homicide rate in Brazil fell by 34%.
Yeah, talk about a correlation.
You make it easy for law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms, criminals are less likely to engage in violent crimes. That's why they target gun-free zones.
Yeah.
The minute you call something a gun-free zone, you're basically just saying, hey, no one here has guns.
Yeah.
And we know the police aren't going to be able to show up for 10, 20, 30 plus minutes.
Yep. I remember another mass shooting. This happened in my hometown of El Paso, Texas, and happened at a Walmart. And I heard a testimony of a lady and her son were there at the Walmart. She was more elderly lady, and her kind of a grown-up son already. But he mentioned how when the gunman started opening fire there at the Walmart, his mom was reaching in her purse because she knew I always carry a gun with me. But Walmart being what it is, she had left it in her car. And so just instinct was, I always keep my gun in my purse, but not here at this gun-free zone, right? And so there's an example there of, man, something could have been less tragic.
Yeah, the same. I guess we see the same situation, going back to Brazil and seeing how their gun crimes dropped by 34%. Right. We see similar data coming from Norway, Finland, Germany, France, and Denmark. All of these countries have a large amount of gun ownership and a history of low murder rates. And so, gun-free zones, they don't work. What you want is your zone filled with guns. You want everyone to have a gun, right? Because, that's going to tell a criminal, this isn't the place for you. Go somewhere else. Because if you come up in here, you're going to have 10 guns pointing at you immediately. It's just not going to go down the way you think it will, right? That's what you want. You want the criminal afraid. And since the government can't get here as quickly as they should, you need the citizens armed. And I think that should be true at schools. I think that should be true at Walmart, just everywhere. If criminals realize that everyone around them is packing, then they're probably not going to engage in their tomfoolery. At the same time, you can look at the places that have heavy gun bans, even out of the country, and what you find there is homicide by knife, by rock, there's guns aren't the only way to kill people. Like if somebody is homicidal, yeah, they'll figure out a way to go about it. Not to give anybody any ideas, but you don't need a gun if you're a homicidal maniac, right?
Yeah, as we said, people use vehicles. knives.
Just like the parade.
Is it and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you've heard this before, homicides, even without a gun, talking about just using your own hands, that outnumbers the number of gun deaths. Is that something that's, am I correct on that?
Yeah, so I've actually got the breakdown here that, so handguns, the nationwide breakdown of homicides, handguns is the largest percentage, 6,365, which is 45.7%. Hands, fists, feet, that's about 600.
Okay.
But so rifles is actually at 2.6%. So these guys that want to criminalize rifles, it's 2.6% of murders, homicides happening from somebody with a rifle. But knives or other cutting instruments, 10.6%.
Wow.
So more people use a knife or a cutting instrument to commit a homicide here in America than rifles.
Yeah.
And then other weapons, just hammers, fire, poison, whatever.
Yeah.
That falls in at 11.4%.
Wow.
But as far as hands, fists, the lethal weapons that you always carry,
the cannons,
4.3%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's surprising on the rifles. What was it? The poison and
11.4%.
Yeah, other tools.
Just blunt objects, narcotics, explosives, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, all that, 11.4%.
Yep. And so, again, this just raises questions as to, okay, let's say we solve the mass shooting by banning rifles. This still leaves a big, big chunk of the pie. Are we really addressing, as Vice President Kamala Harris likes to say, the root causes of these things? What are the root causes? And perhaps we can talk a little bit about this, but just to let you know, we do have about 4 minutes left here in our streaming. Here, we're also streaming to Austin Cable Access Channel 11. But just to let you know, just give you a heads up, we will be jumping over and staying on our YouTube live stream. So if you're watching on Channel 11, just jump over on our YouTube live stream. We'll carry on the conversation there. We're almost done with our discussion, and we'll be having some Q&A time. But perhaps, we can let's talk about these root causes. And I think this is more of a theological conundrum that we're talking about here.
Well, it didn't take long for the first murder to happen after the creation. You had Cain and Abel, brothers, sons of Adam and Eve. And, Cain ends up killing his brother, Abel, out of jealousy, frustration with God, an inability to process his emotions, an unwillingness to sit down and talk through the pain that he was feeling. You could just go on, but at the end of the day, it's his sin nature. Because of the fall of Adam and Eve, you end up with a curse that is then extended to their posterity, which then affected Cain and Abel and everyone else since then. And so at the end of the day, we can talk about mental illness, we can talk about, drugs, we can talk about greed, we can talk about, pride. We could go on with just all the different aspects of what leads a person to engage in an act of homicide. But really at the core, at the very core of it all, it's a sin nature that is leading a person to an extreme measure because they think that this is going to be the solution for their problem. And it's not. It only just compounds. And the best solution is to repent, trust in Jesus Christ, receive the forgiveness of sins that he purchased with his blood on the cross, and then allow him to start transforming our lives, turning us into the people that he's designed us to be, which we were designed in his image.
Yeah. Yeah, right on. Well, we're about to sign off of Austin Cable Access Channel 11, and we'll just take a slight little break. But stay on the YouTube live stream, and we're going to catch you on the backside of this as we end our discussion and enter into our Q&A portion. All right, welcome back. We're still here on YouTube live stream. We're nearing our end of discussion here on should and can the church have pew-pew-pews. That's the official title, but we're talking about guns, ownership, gun control, even violence in the Bible, and what's permitted, what's not. Can we be pacifists? We've considered all these topics and questions throughout our discussion, and hope you've been tuning in with us from the beginning. If you have not, we invite you to catch the replay of this live stream. It'll be uploaded into our Studio 118 YouTube channel at a later point, and there you can check out our older episodes as well. We've covered a range of topics, so we invite you to join the conversation there. But again, if you have any questions for us, we're coming up on our Q&A portion. Feel free to jump on that live chat. Let us know your questions, and we'd be happy to respond at that time. But yeah, we're considering here, we've been considering really what gun control has really done in other nations. Has it really reduced gun violence? And what we see is just evidence before our eyes that the more restrictions you put on the public owning weapons in order to defend themselves, gun violence is run rampant. But when you allow the people to arm themselves, to be able to defend themselves, we see that gun violence actually goes down. So that's very interesting to see. But then we started also talking about root causes, and really it's a theological problem. It's a sin problem. And, as I look through the scriptures even, how there's a lot of talks about, especially in the Psalms, going through the Psalms, there's talks about how the wicked, David wonders a lot why the wicked prosper.
Right.
It's a matter of pride. And he talks about how they're always trying to lay snares for him. They're always trying to attack him in the dead of night, that kind of stuff. But really what he's pointing out is that these wicked people, it really is a pride issue. And that's really a sin issue. It's part of their sin nature. And I wonder, is this really something that we can ever get rid of? I don't think so, right? Just like Jesus told his disciples, the poor will always be with you. I think sin is always going to be, as long as there's humans alive, because they're born with a sin nature, it's always going to be there. And so then our best bet really is, how do we kind of tamper that as much as we can? And what we've been talking about here is by allowing people to defend themselves. And right now, it really is, if you don't have time to wait for law enforcement to show up, especially in these cities that have basically defunded their law enforcement agencies, then you have to be able to take up arms yourself.
Yep.
Right? But ultimately, yes, we're talking about a sin issue I think it's always going to be with us, and doesn't bring any joy for us to say that. But then we have to consider seriously, okay, what do we do about that? We should be able to arm ourselves and defend ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Most certainly.
So, I think we've covered a lot here, man. Is there anything else you want to throw out there?
I just feel like I've been shooting my mouth off the whole time.
Too many puns. Too many puns. Well, that's good, man. I think that brings us to the end of our discussion then. Why don't we consider some questions here? I think we got one that chimed in here, and it's a different take on the pacifist, but it says, shouldn't Christians be martyrs just like the early Christians in the early church age?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
And this really gets us to examining categories once again.
Yes.
And it's always important to think through, like, okay, so what's the scenario? What's the situation? What's my calling? We know the scriptures tell us to provide for our family, which includes protection and provision. So, would it be wrong for me to defend my home, my family, and use a firearm in the process of doing that? Or would I be better? Would I be better served, and would I better serve my family by allowing myself to be a martyr in that scenario? Well, wait a minute. Am I being murdered?
Yeah.
For just money or pleasure, or am I being martyred as a Christian for my testimony? The person who engages in a home of invasion or tries to rob you, Grand Theft Auto or whatever the case, whatever the scenario is, if they're just trying to get my money, they're just trying to, have their way with my family. If they're just trying to, commit their crime, that's not me being a martyr. That's me getting murdered, right? That's something different altogether. Versus getting arrested for my Christian witness and being held on trial for preaching the gospel message. Well, yeah, if that's what God calls me to, then I should. By all means, if the Lord is calling us to be martyred, for our testimony and for our faith in the Lord, if they want to haul me to the guillotine or take me to the place where they, gas you or whatever the case is. If the point is that they're killing you for your testimony, I'll accept that.
Yep. Yeah, so the category difference here is like, what do we mean by martyr? Martyr literally means witness, yeah.
Getting murdered in my house because somebody wants to take, the $20 worth of change I keep in a wooden cup near my refrigerator. There it is.
Okay.
Just have at it.
Yeah.
Have fun rolling those quarters.
Yeah.
I don't keep money in my house.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So am I going to sit back and allow someone to murder my family for $20 change? No, I don't think so. That's not being a martyr. That's being an idiot.
Nice. All right. Here's one I'll throw at you.
Here we go.
So, should there be a limit as to what kind of weapon a person should be able to own? So we saw the Second Amendment clearly shall not be infringed. There's no, like Biden said, can't buy a cannon. But should we? Should we look for a cannon or a tank or whatever other crazy weapons are out there? Yeah,
I don't have an issue with people owning automatic weapons. The fact that what's available to us right now are semi-automatic. Okay, I mean, someone determined at some point in time that we got to draw a line at automatic weapons, and I get it, in the sense that. Yeah, I mean, that might be a little excessive, but shall not be infringed is what it is. Mm-hmm. Shall not be infringed. So, if I were the legislator and somebody was asking me to write the law, I wouldn't put a ban on automatic weapons even. Yeah. I don't have an issue with it. I don't care if somebody owns a tank. I don't care if somebody owns a bazooka or, until they break the law. And that's when you got to go punish the person, right? So if whatever gun whether it's a knife, whether it's poison, whether it's, using explosives, whether it's the minute they break the law, that, you got to go punish them for being a lawbreaker. If they're a law-abiding citizen with a big tank in their garage, what do I care? My body, my choice. Right?
Nice one. Nice one.
You want my body, my choice. Yeah, Yeah. And here's the big conflict here when we compare this to the abortion argument is that the abortionist wants to say, it's my body, therefore I get to murder this baby. Mm. Whereas the gun owner is saying, it's my body, it's my house, I should be able to have a gun, and I'm not going to kill anybody with it. Right. I'm killing nobody with my gun.
Right.
Until someone breaks into my house. And then it's my house, my choice, right?
Yeah.
But so the abortionist wants to be able to have the right to actually terminate the life of their own baby and call that a constitutional right, but then turn around and say, you can't carry an automatic weapon. Why not? As long as I'm not shooting anybody with it, what does it matter how fast the bullets come out?
Yeah.
So yeah, I could, I mean, personally, in my opinion, now I respect the laws that's written right now and whatnot. So I'm not encouraging anybody to go and monkey with their guns and try to turn them into automatic weapons or anything like that. I think that, right now you've got laws against that. So it is what it is. But I'm just saying, in my opinion, I don't, if it's a law-abiding citizen, I don't care what kind of weapons they have.
Yeah.
Because they're not a threat. They're not a problem. They're not an issue. Well, someone could break into their house and steal their guns. Punish them.
Yep.
Put them in jail for a long time. And make sure that they feel the pain of sitting in jail for a long time so that they get out eventually and realize that I shouldn't break into people's homes and steal stuff, right?
Yeah, and I feel that's right. I was just thinking that perhaps what's needed is, stricter enforcement of the laws that are in the books. When you have people that, and perhaps this could be a future episode, if not next month, but talking about capital punishment. When you take a life, multiple lives especially, shouldn't your life be forfeited at that
Most
point?
certainly.
And I've heard arguments, right, even from Christians. There's a Christian case that can be made for being against capital punishment, especially from the government, right? So what works, what's biblical, what's not. So, but I personally, I'm kind of there with you where it really, a lot of this probably is enforcement. When we see that people are getting light sentences, or if not just being paroled or something like that, for violent acts, not necessarily mass shootings, but just violent acts. If the enforcement's not there, then what's to stop the next person?
Right. Now, I totally believe that there needs to be sufficient evidence, that there needs to be strict punishment with sufficient evidence. And the Bible lays out various scenarios of what's required by way of eyewitness reports and whatnot. So, hearsay, like this recent, whistleblower who came forward to talk about how the former president was trying to grab the steering wheel and whatnot. Oh, you saw that? Oh, no. So you heard that. Oh, okay. So, that's what we call hearsay. Why are you on the stand?
Yeah.
Why are you even here? You weren't there. You didn't see anything. You heard somebody talk about this, right? Yeah. You don't get to come to court.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not court.
Well, true. Yes, it's a hearing. So yeah, but you weren't an eyewitness. Yeah. You don't get to come talk about this, right? I mean, that's just the way it should be, right?
It should be.
But yeah, I mean, we've gotten into this kangaroo court system now where, someone who heard about, well, I was at a table and I overheard a phone call conversation, and I'm assuming that I understand what was happening on the other end of that phone, so I'm going to tell you about it in a court of law. No, go away. Yeah. You don't get to come and give testimony that you don't have, right? So, hearsay accusations against people is garbage. That's not justice. Even forensic evidence is debatable. You can put DNA at a scene of a crime and these sort, but why is it there? Mm-hmm. How did it get there? Was there a consensual situation going on or not? I mean, just looking at a crime scene forensically, it can tell you information, but it can't tell you the scene of the crime. It can't tell you what happened completely, right?
Yeah.
So I don't mean to just completely dismiss it. Forensics is a wonderful thing, but it's only part of the information. You need eyewitness testimony. You need people who are credible witnesses. And, so with all of that, then we can start talking about very strict punishment, right? Yeah. So that's where I say, okay, so if we have credible eyewitness testimony that this person murdered that person forfeit their life. We have enough evidence to put this person at the scene of the crime, murdering that person. Yeah, they forfeit their life. We're not going to sit there and give them 3 hots in a cot for the rest of their lives. Yeah, they're done. That person provably raped that person. Snip, snip, you're done. It's over. We're not going to let you rape someone else now. Yeah. You forfeit your manhood. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you watch the rape rate drop. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I really would be interested to look more into that.
Criminals need to fear punishment. And because they don't, criminals continue to be criminals.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, so that'd be, I'm sure it'll be a future conversation there.
Pew, pew, pew.
Well, with that, people on the internet, we thank you for sticking with us here for another good episode of Studio 118. We've considered Christians and guns, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot of good information out of it. Again, if you have any other questions that you'd like to reach out to us after the fact, feel free to call us. Again, that number is 512-576-5433. Or you can always email us. We have a number just for our episodes here. It's outreach@calvarysouthaustin.com. We'd love to hear from you. But once again, we'll be signing off. I'm Reuben. This is Bunjee. Thank you for joining. See you guys next month.